Hello, everybody, and welcome to Plus One to Armor Class, Protecting Yourself with Healthy Boundaries. I am so excited to be here today with our panelists. I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves. I will go first. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Kilmer. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Director of Education and Training at Game to Grow. Game to Grow is a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in the greater Seattle area that believes in the use of games of all kinds to support growth and change in our participants in therapeutic, educational, and community settings. And I'm also going to ask the panelists, in addition to name, pronouns, role, and organization, what's your current favorite geeky thing? I think my current favorite geeky thing is Cult of the Lamb. It is my current. Fair. Shawna, will you go next?
Sure. Hello, my name is Shawna Spain. I go by she, her. I am the founder of the Spoon Conservatory, which will be a consulting agency that will be out in a little bit. My current favorite geeky thing game-wise is this game called The Last Cube, because the cube has emotions, and I can, what do the kids say? I can vibe with that. Am I using that accurately? Do I pick the next person, or you want to pick the next person?
You can pick the next person.
Diana.
Oh, come on, man. Hi, guys. I'm Diana DiMicco. She, her are my pronouns. I'm one half of Barden Barbarian. I've worked with a lot of different groups in the TTRPG space. I run a lot of World of Darkness stuff for the Renegade crew. I think that's it as far as organizations concerned. I'll be the loud one here tonight. I've got some dark hair and just a big cozy sweater. I'm so excited to chat with you guys. My current favorite geeky thing, that's real tough, but I'm going to go ahead and say I've been getting super into Ren fairs lately because my wonderful husband went to one last weekend and brought me home the most beautiful sword in existence. So I've been carefully plotting the easiest ways to tout that about at every opportunity. We'll pass it off to Amelia.
Cool. I'm Dr. Amelia Herbst. My pronouns are she, her. I just had a title change, so I had to think about what it was. I'm the program coordinator for the assessment program at Game to Grow. So I do all of the fun tabletop RPG stuff that Elizabeth does for the most part. I'm not as cool to do the trainings, but I also run the psychological evaluation side of things. So we try to help folks get diagnoses because that's super important for some of us. For those of you that might forget my name, because I forget my name all the time, I am the ghostly pale one in a dark background with kind of the Sith vibes going on. So you should be able to identify me pretty easily. Just think Darth Vader, I think. As far as geeky stuff, the whole reason why I've got the Sith vibe going on is I super am also enjoying Cult of the Lamb right now. I think I've like 2 games in, and I cannot do the evil stuff. I just can't. I can't bring myself to do it. I just can't. So with that, I am so excited because I get to pass it off to Jay.
I had to unmute myself. Didn't want you to hear my cat screaming. Hi, I'm Jay Justice. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the director of LGBTHQ, the hub for all things queer at Comic-Cons. We did that before the pandemic. We've been shifting more into online support because we did not feel right having people go out at conventions during a pandemic. My favorite current geeky thing, I'm really, really, really enjoying Horizon Forbidden West. It's just taken over my entire life. And I both want to finish the game so I can know what's happening, but I also want to do every single side quest and pick every single berry and just do everything. It is super fun. Outside of LGBTHQ, I'm also a developer, consultant, and editor. I work in all the different comics and video game geek spaces.
Thanks so much. I have not let myself open Horizon Forbidden West yet because I know that that's coming. Absolutely.
Something bad happened and I was like, no. So I'm waiting until the no goes away so I can continue playing.
That's very fair. I forgot to do the descriptions of what I look like, and Shawna, you put yours in the chat. But I am not the palest one here, which is rare for me because I'm very pale, and I have bright pink hair and some cool blue headphones. And Shawna is a blonde, skinny white chick Her glasses are purple and have purple lenses, which are very cool. And basically everything everywhere.
She's got
around
hacker
Shawna
vibes going on.
You do have hacker
Shawna has
vibes
hacker vibes going on.
The purple
Say
is,
I'm in.
I'm in.
There
Are
you go.
you making
You did it.
me make a reference? No, they're prism lenses. So those of you out there that are ADHD and have a lot of migraines, look into prism lenses.
Absolutely. So let's get started talking about some more geek and gaming stuff. Where did you get your start in geek and gaming culture? Did you start really early when you were a little tiny kiddo, or did you get into it a little bit later in life? Anybody can go first.
I'll start because mine's really boring. Is that okay? I got into the geek space and the TTRPG space later on in life. I was struggling with a lot of things going on, and I sort of fell into D&D, and it was a wonderful cushiony hug to sink my entire attention span into at the time. And then I went to a convention in Indianapolis and I met my husband there, and now that's our whole lives.
I wasn't allowed to play video games because my biological parents were told I might be autistic, and they decided to keep me away from computers because that would fix it. It did not. So when I got older, I was dating a guy who was playing like Assassin's Creed or something, and I became immediately obsessed. And then they were playing Shadowrun, him and his friends, and I was like, what the hell is this? And I went to a PAX and I was like, I live here now. And there I am surrounded by dice, just literally. There are dice in most of the pockets of my jackets.
It's true. I can attest to this.
Like I seriously, somebody the other day was like, somebody roll a d20, and I was like, okay, and I rolled one, and they were like, you just have them on your desk, and I was like, yeah, I do. Yep.
So mine's a bit of a fun story. My mom was actually playing Super Mario Brothers on the original Game Boy when she was in labor with me. So I like to say that clearly I came into the world with somebody playing video games. So it's kind of one of those fun like facts I like to throw in there. But my first gaming system was a Game Boy Color with Pokemon Yellow as the like first game I was able to play. And then I took a long break. I think it's because I was like trying to hide from my identity, even though I'm like, I like Batman and I like all of these other geeky things. And then I got into grad school and I was bought Skyrim, and then back down the hole I went, and I've been there ever since, and I like being here.
You're the only one left, Jay.
Sorry. Okay.
Maybe she wants to keep her origin story mysterious.
It's not mysterious. It's not mysterious. Okay, so when I was really little, I was an only child for a while, and reading was my favorite thing. And I read the only book I was allowed to read, the Bible, many, many times, until one day I snuck into my uncle's room and I found a comic book. It was Punisher War Journal. And my mother was horrified.
That is both a wild transition and honestly not that wild of a transition.
I was literally just thinking the same thing.
I was like, I want more comic books. So I saved my little money until I was able to go to the store and buy like X-Men and Avengers and stuff. And I like loving comic books is what got me into video games, because they had comic book video games. And then from there, it was all over. They couldn't stop me.
That's awesome. What do you enjoy most about being a part of this kind of larger geek space?
So I'm autistic and an ambulatory wheelchair user, and I will not shut up about accessibility. So I think what I love the most about it is that I learned how to like talk to humans by playing games, and it became a place where I felt safe and I could be myself, or I could just have fun rather than trying to like look like a proper young lady. And I've made some of my best friends. I have released some autistics into the wild with those, and I really enjoy the sort of collaborative storytelling element, because I'm a writer, and I just seemed to really flourish. So I think it's a really nice space for disabled folks, and I'm going to awkwardly stop talking now.
When you say released autistics into the wild, I think
So-
that needs like a teeny bit more context.
So I have an autistic rater that currently is at 100% correct identifying. So I have lured some autistics into some of my games, and they get to interact with openly autistic folks. And by the end of it, they're like, I'm autistic. And I go, yes, go have fun. And
That sounds like actually the most ethical way you could possibly do that.
I never tell anybody they're autistic. The only
Yeah.
person I did that to was my twin, and you can't stop me from that. So yeah, I don't tell anyone. I usually wait for them to very awkwardly be like, am I autistic? And I always respond with, do you think you're autistic? And they're like, am I allowed? You're allowed to be. Oh God. And it's fun.
I think that says a lot about TTRPGs in general. So I know that I found my identity here. Before I started playing D&D and before I started working in the industry, I was a very meek person, and I didn't really have a lot of direction. I didn't have a lot of faith in myself as an individual. I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. But stepping into the TTRPG space and being allowed to take up space here was sort of what sorry guys, it's what made me the monster I am today. So I think that what Shawna's experience has been can kind of be expanded a little bit. I'll say I don't think that I am autistic. I don't think that I am on the spectrum anywhere, but it helped me discover who I was too.
Mm-hmm.
I think I appreciate just being able to exist with humans that have similar interests to me. So a friend or colleague, peer of most of the group is Dr. Rachel Cowart, who is the Cavill influencer and loves The Witcher. So when she really started getting into The Witcher, to be able to go to someone to be like, let's talk. Can you read the book and text me about it? And then I had another friend be like live texted through the most recent season of The Witcher, just to have a community to just like sit with and to be like, this is something I feel really strongly about and you're not going to judge me for it. Or you're not going to be like, okay, Amelia, like pack it in, go back to do your work. It's just so validating to just have that like shared energy and shared excitement around something that like we might kind of be embarrassed about, but to be like, nah, me too. I read the books 3 times just like you did, and let's talk about details. Like, thank you.
I absolutely feel the same way. It's like being part of any like fandom is a way to escape the things that you just don't want to deal with in your real life, or just to enjoy completely changing your mind space and just enveloping yourself in a different like universe. And sometimes you get to find friends who are like right there with you and you just live in that moment. Like that's part of why cosplaying for me is so fun, because I have friends where like we put our costumes on and we're gone. We are those characters for the entire day and we don't have to check in with ourselves until like tomorrow. So like it can be really fun. It's such a great way to escape and such a great way to find like strength in yourself and to just like find a way to focus. And then you slowly but surely level up to the point where I have a friend who loves cosplay so much but could not find the right shoes. She became a cobbler because she could not find the right shoes.
That is amazing.
Now she's making these like amazing. I'm like, when are you going to start selling these to me? Like, I like these are so good.
That's the most cosplayer thing I've ever heard.
Like, I watched her make shoes from nothing and I'm like, this is ridiculous. She's like, well, I couldn't find them and I have size 5 feet, so I'm not going to live like this anymore. I cannot wear these little kid light up sneakers for the rest of my life, James.
I'm sorry, those sneakers are great, but
not if you're trying to cosplay Storm from the X-Men.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's absolutely amazing. I love this community is amazing because we all do that, right? Like I fell in love with fountain pens and now I'm gonna make them, god damn it, This is so fun.
Exactly.
Well, and I love the like themes that are coming through here around community, around finding yourself, around also like finding a kind of a safe space to take a break from some of the hard things that may be showing up in your life or the larger world right now. So this is obviously a conversation about boundaries. So we're going to be talking a lot about setting boundaries, about how to feel okay about setting boundaries, because that can be really hard. And to effectively have that conversation, we really need to keep intersectionality in mind. The combination of identities we hold can offer us more or less power in the context of geek spaces to set boundaries that will then be respected. Are there any identities that you feel comfortable sharing that impact the way that you set boundaries? I can go first. So I won't be talking I'm going to try and fade in the background as much as I can, but I'll be vulnerable first. So I'm a cis woman, I'm white, but I'm a woman in gaming spaces. I'm also queer, but I can be straight passing, and I have ADHD, and all of those pieces and like my life experience being a queer woman with ADHD really impact especially how legitimate I often feel and reasonable I feel when I'm trying to set boundaries with other people, especially when they don't like them. Anybody else willing to share?
Yeah. So I'm queer, I'm gender fluid, I'm disabled, I'm Black, and my disability is not invisible when I'm using my wheelchair or my crutches or my cane. And a lot of people expect you to just divulge your entire medical history because they're curious about why you're sitting in a wheelchair. And it's really like awful to get to a convention as the guest of honor and be expected to clean something because you're Black. Yeah, so it's boundaries. Like people just thrust them up at me and I'm like, hi, where's your boss?
Yeah, no.
Absolutely. Well, and that space right around like, what are the boundaries that you have to set and are expected to set? I'm unlikely to need to set a boundary around like, I'm not going to clean up after you. I may have to set a boundary around like, I'm not going to go get you coffee. But thinking about the way in which those pieces intersect is, yeah, absolutely.
I basically have to say I'm not gonna arrive at a convention without someone who knows who I am meeting me at the door, because I've been told that my wheelchair isn't allowed inside the building.
Yeah, I got that one.
Yep.
There's also this just sort of because it's a hobby industry, but so many of us are professionals within it. There's this expectation that we are accessible 24 hours a day. We're accessible on the weekends. We're people who are playing games, and we're visibly on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok. We're doing it all the time. So then we're available all the time too. When that's the trickiest balance that I've found, is treating it like a job as well as a hobby. But I mean, the boundaries that I have had to set are all pretty minimal things in terms of like public interactions. It always seems to come from the business side of things that stuff gets really sticky and convoluted and muddied. But yeah, it's a totally different ballpark now that we live so much of our lives online, and things like TikTok are accessible all the time.
I feel pretty privileged. I think a lot of my boundary setting, so being a cis woman, is more so just making sure folks don't talk down to me about certain things. So I made the reference about being a huge Witcher fan. The figure over my shoulder is not Brienne of Tarth, I'm sorry, friends. It's actually Regis, who is a kind of minor character in the Witcher universe. And it's one of those things that when I have a conversation with people, they're kind of like, okay, yeah, Witcher, Henry Cavill, blah, blah, blah. That's why you like it. And first of all, that's totally legitimate, and that shouldn't matter. And second of all, then I start being like, no, but like, I really appreciate Regis, and I have to, and when I start talking about him, it's like, suddenly I got like, get like this like level of respect that I actually know what I'm talking about. And it's like, you need to not talk to me like that. I've gotten better with that with time, but it's actually a boundary I'm still working on, especially when I've got folks that are like, you know, almost kind of, we would like to think that we're out of this whole time period where it's like oh yeah, you like Batman, tell me more villains than the Joker. And it's like, this is not necessary. Please do not do this to me. So I feel like boundary setting for me has been more so that, and thankfully I'm not seeing it as much anymore, but honestly, sometimes I got to do it with my own friends and family, and it's like frustrating.
So I'm pretty vocal about being autistic, and that seems to give a lot of different folks, they feel like they have license to be like, you are now the only autistic I will believe, or they'll ask me really ridiculous questions, and they challenge things that are like basic for me. Like, I live this experience, and they'll be like, no, it's not. And it's like, and so boundary setting can be difficult because you have to have the other person has to be a partner with you in that space. Like, they have to almost allow the boundary in a lot of ways in certain spaces where things can be like where you don't have a lot of control. And that's what I'm currently trying to like do better for myself, is when I'm really not in control of a situation and I still want to set a boundary, like doing that safely. And that's really tricky, because I went through an autistic burnout last fall, and I cannot socially mask to save my life. And you kind of need to do that when you're talking to unsafe people. So it's tricky, and the boundaries move, which is weird, So I think there are all kinds of things. People touch my wheelchair constantly. They ask me questions about it every time I go outside. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, let's talk about the Omeo. It's great. And sometimes I'm like, I just want to get a milkshake, and you are stopping me from doing that. And I had I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user, so I got up out of my chair to go to the bathroom, and this woman was like, oh, how dare you, and started screaming at me in the hallway. And I was like, oh, lady, I have to pee. Like, can we do this another time? And it's tricky, because a lot of the boundary setting tends to have to come with sort of an education component of like, yes, please stop screaming at me, because ambulatory wheelchair users exist, and it's people like you that make people like me have to go all the way disabled before we can use them. And I don't want to have to do that every minute of the day. And so learning how to balance that for myself is kind of setting your boundaries for yourself can be very tricky.
I also hate that they make you say all the way disabled, as if there's some magic meter that you have to meet in order to qualify to be disabled. Right. Like, I'm sorry, you're disabled no matter whether you're in your wheelchair or not, and people need to respect that boundary and not ask you your personal history or like challenge your existence in a space because of it. Is a deep frustration that we both share.
I used to do this talk where I would come out in my wheelchair, and then I'd stand up, and people in the audience would gasp, and I'd be like, yeah, you've seen TV. Here's the thing. And I'd start talking about invisible disabilities. And it was really fun, because you're really flipping things on their head, and you're in a situation like my leg starts to shake if I stand up for too long, and I will topple right the hell over. And my service dog climbed up on the stage and was like, no, mama, and like herded me back to my chair. And like, you see something like that, and people are like, all right, I get it. They shouldn't have to see that to get it, right? Like, and I grew up thinking people in wheelchairs couldn't walk. So this is something I've learned over time too, but it's still frustrating when everybody around me doesn't know exactly what I know.
Well, I think there's also a difference between like, oh, that is something that I didn't know, right? Like if I also, when I was little, thought that if you were in a wheelchair, you could not walk, right? But I think there's a difference between going like, oh, I didn't know about that, versus yelling at someone and accusing them of faking. Also, because wheelchairs are really expensive.
They're so expensive. I don't want this chair. I'm not even going to say how much this chair costs, but I will tell you I could have bought a car. Like, seriously, this thing is expensive. I don't want it. Ugh.
It is a cool chair, though.
It is very cool, yes. I drive it with my butt.
I'm not going to let you explain that anymore, because I think it's funnier when you don't.
Yes, I have stopped explaining it because I think it's hilarious to watch people be like, what?
So, Shawna, you mentioned kind of an education component occasionally when you're setting boundaries. I'm curious, how do y'all communicate your boundaries with people? I'm assuming this is going to be different if it's kind of online or in person, if it's someone who's yelling at you or asking you something egregiously inappropriate versus someone who hasn't crossed a boundary yet. I'm curious if you have kind of any anecdotes, or if you have like a system in your head about how you decide how to communicate or set a boundary.
If it feels like something that could just be an honest mistake, because we're human, right? Like, humans make mistakes. Human beings send messages at 6 a.m. on a Sunday to someone who isn't working and realize way too late that that's not a cool thing to do. So I usually start off those interactions with a why statement. So as an individual, I found that it helps me in communications for someone to give me a reason why. Hey, I'd really prefer it if you didn't message me on my private personal Facebook about Die Hard Dice business at 6 a.m. on a Sunday, because that's really the time that I take for myself. And we've already established clear ways for you to get in touch regarding our arrangement. So if it's something like that could just be like someone, it slipped their mind. I'll usually clarify and then make an additional request with some other options. You can contact me via email. This is when I'm going to be available, X, Y, or Z. If it's something that is a blatant disregard for my comfort or the comfort of someone else around me, then it is a point blank imperative. Do not do this. Don't do this again. Stop it right now. And there's nothing beyond that, and it shouldn't have to go beyond that, especially in cases where Shawna and Jay, like you guys having to justify your existence in that space. It shouldn't have to be more than a simple stop, go away. Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in, but I'm far more clear in those blatant disregard situations. And it usually probably makes me out to be kind of a B word, but you know what? It's deserved in that case.
Yes, I will validate that. It kind of depends on my mood. I go everywhere from something like nope and just I keep moving to if I am in one of my moods and somebody says what's wrong with you, I say come here. You know what that sounds like? That's like me asking you if your wife has ever had a sexual is your kid like and I'm doing this badly right now, but I used to have like a script that really set people back, and they'd be like, you can't ask me those things, like have you ever had cancer, like whatever, and I'm like, yeah, that's what you're doing to me. And they're like, well, I'm just curious. And I'm like, cool, go be curious over there, because but sometimes I don't mind explaining it. But if I've got all my stuff and I'm heading out the door and it's the end of the day, like don't do that to people, and maybe ask if it's okay. Like we live in a world where being like, hey, can I ask you a question about your chair? And if the answer is no, do not get upset. Say thank you, walk away, be polite, because that person doesn't owe you that explanation. And if they want to give you one, give them the chance to do that, but just don't be a dick about it.
My hard boundary is that nobody is entitled to my diagnosis or my medical history or anything like that. I don't care. However, if I find a person has never heard of a disability outside of amputation or paralysis that can cause wheelchair use, I will explain what an autoimmune disease is so they can have that knowledge and not harass the next person. If I am not in immediate danger from this person about to harm me, and like if I'm in the back of an Uber and it's going to be a long Uber and this man's going to keep asking, I'm like, let me explain to you what lupus is, just as a general thing. I'm not saying I have it. I'm just letting you know that there are many different types of illnesses that could cause this. Oh, okay, great. Can we just put the music back on? Like, oh my God. Like, you don't need to know someone's exact experience to understand that the world is bigger than what you have dreamed of. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's more out there that you just don't know. And ignorance is not a crime, but action that is negatively impacting others that is based on your ignorance is where you have fucked up. Like,
I have to remember this thing that somebody told me once, that there's a ladder of inference. So a woman approached me. I used to work in a retail environment, and she was like, she saw the dog and she's like, oh, you're blind. And I was like, I am not. How can I help you, ma'am? And she's like, oh, you must be one of those autistic kids. And I was like, well, I am actually. And it threw me because autistics don't look a certain way. And I barely knew about autistic service dogs when I got one. And it was such a perfect example of the ladder of inference for me. Everybody knows that service dogs are guide dogs. Her next thing that she knew was that autistics got service dogs, you know, and I find that really fascinating. And when I'm in a good mood, I collect all the data on it. But when I'm in a bad mood, I'm like, go read a book. The internet exists. You can yell at your phone and get answers. Come on.
I think when considering gatekeeping, I spent a lot of time in school to get the title of doctor. So the way that I describe it is, if you trust me to spend 7 to 11 years in school so I can diagnose you with a mental health disorder, and so I can help you with treatment for it, or so I can help you like feel better depending on what's going on, why can't you trust me that I've spent 150 hours just in blood and wine alone, and I can probably tell you the whole map just from memory? So what's the difference there? Is it that like video games are supposed to be gendered? Is it that, you know, you're a therapist and that's a girl thing, which is not true? So what is it? If I can spend all of this time doing one thing, why can't I spend a lot of time truly embracing something else? And I think that's kind of like how I introduce that conversation. And surprisingly, it's actually helped a lot more than I expected it would.
There's a really interesting piece that comes up there. Like when someone comes to me and they're looking for an assessment or they're looking for therapy, I absolutely expect them to ask me questions about my training or my competence in certain areas, right? Like if I'm going to look for a therapist, I want to make sure that my therapist has experience working with individuals with ADHD. So I'm going to ask them questions about that because I am interviewing them for a job. Whereas if I go, if I walk up to a random human on the street that I am not like, we are not in a consensual conversation for me to employ them, I'm often expecting the same amount of emotional labor from that person than I would someone that I am, again, interviewing for a job, or if I'm going to a doctor and looking for information about why I'm sick or what that looks like. And so it's this really interesting space in which that is a great analogy, Amelia. And it's kind of wild that there's this similar expectation that you potentially have to prove your diagnosis, your information, how much information you know about the Witcher or whatever it looks like. I'm curious, as y'all have continued to exist in these spaces, how your boundaries have changed over time. Are there any boundaries that you used to feel kind of uncomfortable or unreasonable setting that you now feel much more comfortable setting?
I used to give my cell phone number to people. I would say, get in touch with me whenever you need something. Because again, it's a hobby industry. It's super competitive to be here and to be someone and to take up space and get a job and make money and not starve to death. It's competitive. So when I first started working in TTRPGs, I was accessible 24/7. I killed myself to bend over backwards for people who would not have thought twice of me if I were hit by a bus tomorrow. I don't do that anymore. What I've found is that there is a sincerity in the TTRPG space that people can read you a little bit better than I think they probably can outside of this. Maybe, you know, those interactions with people on the street are going to be very, very different than you interacting with someone who's a part of the TTRPG space on Twitter. You know, you see who they interact with, you see how they interact with those people, and you get kind of a sense of their presence. I don't do those sort of outlandish, detrimental personal things anymore because there's no reason to. You know, it's kind of like Amelia was talking about with establishing your nerd cred. It's that whole thing, right? I was doing all of this above and beyond and way past what was comfortable or professional, frankly, doing all of that because I thought it would give me some kind of edge, when in reality, that's not the kind of presence you want to establish in the first place. So now I'm very concrete about it. I say, hey, you know, these are my office hours. This is how I would like you to get in touch with me about official business. And I give everybody one redo because, you know, I talk about TTRPGs a lot on my personal Twitter. So I expect people will send me DMs there and ask me to do things. But most of the time I'm like, hey, could you direct that to my business email? And people have respected that boundary when it's been set. So I used to be scared to do that. And then once I finally did and people respected it, I was like, oh, I could have been doing this all along. What?
Well, it's that space in which, like, boundaries are really helpful communication devices, both for you and for other people. And you're always going to, at some point in time, encounter people who don't want to respect your boundaries or don't care about your boundaries. But a lot of the people that you engage with, especially the ones that you want to keep engaging with, absolutely want to know what those boundaries are so that they are able to respect them. If I'm working with other peers in the industry, I absolutely want to know, do you want to be contacted via Twitter? Do you want to be contacted via email? In part, because if I contact you using your preferred method of contact, I'm way more likely to get an efficient response.
I asked now because it's made things so much easier. Because there are other people who don't want to set that boundary. I'm sorry, Shawna, go ahead.
Yes, I wish people would just be like, hello, my name is Shawna, and I prefer that you contact me on Twitter. And then we can have a conversation. That would be amazing. Or like if everybody had a little business card that's like, don't touch my hair, don't touch my dog, and email me if you want. Like, I wish that was a social norm. And I love it when I'm talking to somebody and they're like, if you call me on the phone, I will never speak to you again. It's like, cool, email's good. I love people that set that boundary because I want it, and sometimes I'll ask and I'll be like, hey, what would you prefer? And they're like, anything. And I'm like, oh, just pick one. just pick one.
You don't mean that.
Yeah, like that's never true. Just pick one. I had to set a boundary for myself. I believed that people would only be my friend if I played games and showed up on time and always showed up, even if I was in massive amounts of pain or couldn't talk straight. And it took me a really long time to realize that that's not true. Not because of my friends. My friends are awesome. But the industry is kind of weird about that, where you're only a good player if you show up every time and pay attention the whole time and never interrupt somebody. And these are all things that I can't be great at, and I don't have control over whether these things work every day. And setting that boundary for myself helped me use that boundary with others. And it's sometimes hard to enforce it on them, where they're like, I don't feel good, now you hate me. And it's like, nope, I don't hate you. I feel great that you're telling me that what you need. But it's a struggle. And I like to tell people that people will be friends with you even if you can't show up to the game every Saturday. And if you're playing with folks that won't be your friend if you don't show up every Saturday, maybe find a new group.
Aw, that's so sweet.
Yeah, it's dumb.
No, it's wholesome and adorable. I feel bad about mine now. Oh well.
Oh no.
Okay, so I have oh god. Okay, so I've been cosplaying for like over a decade, and I've been doing like conventions and panels and stuff like that. And so I have like a few people who follow me on various social medias, and I try to help the community out where I can. But like I am a poor disabled person, so I don't really have like money. But whenever I get like a surplus of free like meal plans, I will absolutely post about, hey, if anyone needs a meal plan, anyone needs like a week of like Home Chef or HelloFresh or whatever, just send me your email. I'll send one to you. Like, it's fine. And occasionally people will ask for money instead. I'll be like, I'm really sorry, I don't have money. I just have free codes for food. Like it's all I have. I will give you as much food as you can possibly take, but I cannot do money. And the boundary I have to set hard is like, okay, if you keep asking me for money I don't have, I'm going to have to block you. Like, I'm sorry. And I felt really guilty, but like, what can you do? Like, you can't get water from a stone, man. And I have a lot of public social media, but I have like just one that's just for like me and my very close friends and family. And I was at a party and someone who I don't know came over and was like, will you add me on your Facebook? And I was like, I don't know you. You'll get to know me. I was like, no.
I know enough right now.
That's some serial killer shit.
Oh, God.
And my friends were there going,
I get that a lot. I have at least 400 ignored Facebook friend requests because like that's another boundary. My Facebook is my personal space. I go on there and I complain about toothpaste and Lowe's. Like that's what Facebook's for. Don't add me on Facebook.
My name is like not even an introduction. We left that party going, who was that?
You'll never know now, Jay.
We will never know now. So yeah, that's my boundary right there. I will not add people who are super weird to me at parties, but like, I won't add anybody I don't know on Facebook.
That's such a low bar.
It's really hard to add someone whose name you don't know on Facebook.
I don't know. Maybe
Like
they're gonna beam me their information over.
There's like some layer. There's a lot of layers there. Okay.
I ran. Maybe they had a folded up note. I ran away. I'll never know.
Oh, there was like a dossier that they were going to provide to you.
It was in their
resume.
hand that they were trying to get you to shake, and you're just like, I don't want it. And they're like, but there's a note in my hand. Yeah, no, we could do this all day. More and more elaborate scenarios. Yeah, a bunch of storytellers here. We're doomed.
I think for me, it's just as being a mental health provider and being like one of the few mental health providers with some of my friends, it's choosing when to challenge questionable information that they've learned from other sources. Especially if it's like borderline questionable information. Like I can see that for certain people, but that's not true all of the time. So I think that it's one of those things that even though this is my work, this is my life, I want to make sure that the mental health field has credibility and that folks are getting what they need. And I love folks that share information to make sure that like others can like go, oh, that's excellent insight. Maybe I should check that out for myself. Awesome. But there's so much misinformation out there too, that when I have a lovely human that I care about a lot, spewing it to other lovely humans that I love, it's very hard for me to be like, not to be a dick, excuse my language, not to be a jerk, but let me tell you what's correct here, and let me tell you it's a little blown out of proportion, just so we can make sure that everyone's getting like fairly correct information, and then you can choose what to do with that, what you wish. And it's a lot sometimes, so it's like setting that boundary with myself, and then having to set boundary with friends, and it's like, you cannot send me every TikTok and ask me whether or not it's right. Because probably 9 out of 10 times I'll go, parts of it. And then I don't want to explain anymore. Like, sorry.
I feel like the biggest thing that, our responsibility to the world around us is, if you're one of those people who's gotten the hang of setting boundaries and you feel like that's a skill that you have, first of all, so few people are comfortable asking for what they want or need. Because it's just something that people don't do, right? We've been conditioned to believe that if we ask for anything more than we're given, they're going to say no, they're going to hate us, we're going to lose our job, we're going to lose that opportunity, whatever. So I've discovered that since I've started setting boundaries for myself more, I've gotten way better at helping other people establish their own boundaries, like asking people how they want to be communicated and saying, okay, I'll contact you next business day for X, Y, or Z. Or saying, hey, do you want him to hug you at conventions? Like that kind of stuff is like just urging others to maybe follow suit and help themselves is a big thing that that has definitely changed over the last few years, at least for me.
So jumping in around that piece, thinking about if anybody who's watching right now has questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. If we have time, we'll try and answer a couple of them. If there's somebody who's watching today who has set boundaries before, or like hasn't super set boundaries and is kind of struggling to figure out how to set those, maybe some of that is around communication challenges, or maybe that person is sitting there and going like, I don't think that I deserve to get to set these boundaries. What advice would you give those people?
First of all, why do you think you don't deserve to set boundaries? So I felt like I had to ask that question. If you're asking yourself that, do not ask yourself, why do I deserve? You absolutely deserve to set boundaries. I think my advice would actually be like bouncing off of all of these lovely humans is, I think Diana said it, is when you set boundaries, it also is letting you know who is worth keeping in your life, be it friends, be it business contacts, be it family. And when boundaries continue to be pushed, especially if it's like boundaries that like have to do with your health or have to do with like, if you're exploring gender or anything that has to do with you and like just how you exist and how you're going to be comfortable in this world. And if they're not respecting it, then they're not going to respect you. And it's okay to set those boundaries. And quite frankly, when we set boundaries, it's not just healthy for us, it's also healthy for the other people in our lives too, especially if they don't know how to communicate with us or what we need.
I think mine is, if you're going to set a boundary that involves another person doing something, you have to say it out loud. At least once. I find a lot of people set boundaries and then get all offended when I cannot read their minds. So keep in mind that setting a boundary, part of that is communicating. And that I think that's an important piece people don't always understand, that there are situations where you can yell no and it's not well understood, right? There are absolutely situations where you can yell no and everybody knows exactly what you mean, but the communication part, I think, is important. So if you're thinking, well, I don't know how to communicate this boundary, I would say, like, find the most comfortable way that you can think of, like what it feels the safest for you, and try that out. But you need to talk to people. It sucks, but you got to do it.
Or hand them a fancy business card that has your rules.
Yeah, there are 7 of them. 2 of them are very sassy, and it's purple.
I always go back to 2 truths. Number 1 is that very few people go into an interaction wanting animosity, right? Very few people mean to do harm when they are getting in touch, contacting you, meeting you at a convention. I won't say everybody, because there are crappy people out there, but most people don't mean to do anything wrong. And it sounds so stupid, but you're doing them a favor by letting them know, hey, this is something that you did that made me uncomfortable or that I didn't like. Because I promise you, they'll remember that. Oh, it's this person that I liked, that I admire, and I made them uncomfortable. Crap, I should really just ask people if they're comfortable taking pictures with me from here on out. The other piece of that is treat other people how you want to be treated. Like, that is the foundation of which I have built my entire social interaction. If I were just meeting someone on the street, but I recognized them, I would walk up, unless they were busy, introduce myself, say, I love the work that you've done. May I take a picture with you? May I ask you a question? X, Y, or Z, and move on. So the golden rule has served me very, very well in that regard. I don't feel like I've stepped on too many toes by being overly forward with folks or crossing personal boundaries as far as communication goes. And it's because I would be super uncomfortable if people reached out to me randomly. So I assume everyone else is too.
There. We do have a question in chat, but I know not everybody's answered this bit yet, so.
What's the question? Do you ever feel uncomfortable setting boundaries? Is that the question?
The question was, what advice would you give to somebody who's like just getting started setting boundaries?
Oh, okay. That your first responsibility is not to other people, it's to yourself. And you need to preserve your mental health for the things that you need to do and the people that you want to spend time with. And for every single ounce of yourself that you let get sanded away by people who are violating your personal space and your boundaries and your mental happiness, that's less of you that you get to enjoy, that you get to spend with your friends and family. So you really have to remember to preserve yourself by setting those boundaries. It's not something that you're taking away from anybody, because you are your own person and you belong to yourself. You don't belong to the public. Okay, you're not the queen, whatever. You belong to yourself. That's it.
Well, and those friends and family ideally want you to take care of yourself, right? And so by setting boundaries, oftentimes what we're doing is we are creating a space, right? If my friend regularly crosses my boundary and I don't tell them about that, then I'm going to start feeling resentful, and I'm going to start feeling frustrated, and I'm going to start feeling unsafe around that friend. Now, obviously there are certain boundaries that like are pretty clear, like depending on the cultural space that you're in. But if it's a boundary that's more personal for me that they might not know about, I'm contributing to the destruction of that friendship by not being willing to tell my friend that they have spinach in their keys.
Yeah. I think boundaries are very much about safety. This isn't which color plate you prefer. It's you're making a decision to communicate as something that you need for safety reasons. I think that's another. I was dealing with a little kid, and he was like, "My boundary is that I will only eat the things that are yellow." And I was like, "That's not a boundary, bud." He was like, "What's the boundary?" And I was like, "A boundary is like, I'm not allowed to throw mud at you." And he was like, "But you are." And I was like, "Okay, let's back up." It was really difficult to find one, but found one, and I think that can be a little difficult to concept wise to be like, but is this about safety? Yeah.
I'm going to jump to the question in the chat really quick. So for congoers, how do you set boundaries with other congoers, especially those who don't understand personal space?
Loudly, firmly, and in front of witnesses.
I start off with the "please do not touch me," and it gets louder from there. And then, of course, when interacting with others, lead by example. Is it okay if we take a picture together? May I talk to you for a minute? That kind of stuff.
My community is very often folks that do not understand personal space. And so I find that that when they interact with somebody like me that does not use subtext or understand it, and I'm very, very clear, like, this is not okay. If you keep doing it, this is not going to get better. And I get frustrated sometimes that I end up having to give a lot of context, but for the folks in my kinds of communities, I understand that that's kind of necessary. So when I go to a con, I know that I'm going to need to do that. And I think that can be important, that if you're going to go to a con and you're going to do something like cosplay or be, public about anything, be ready to set that boundary.
And what everyone else said, but also don't be afraid to pull in your supports if you need it. Because there are humans out there that will not respect your boundaries, especially if they feel like that you're the only one that's putting them and you're by yourself. So if you have a support system, if you need to find an enforcer, if you go to something like PAX, you're more than welcome to bring other people in to do it. It's not, you don't have to worry about embarrassing them. You don't have to worry about whatever things that we have societally been like pre-programmed to think about it. Feel free to get more people involved to help. It's okay to do that.
I had to do that because some guy saw me hug my sister, and then when she left, he's like, "Well, where's my hug?" And I'm like, as loudly as possible so that people who work in the booth next to me came to see what I was yelling about. Like, "That's my sister. I'm going to hug her. You're a strange man. You're not going to touch me. I will fight you." Like, I was just like, no. He was getting really aggressive and weird. Mm-mm.
I've had really good luck setting boundaries ahead of time too for conventions, especially because, especially on TTRPG Twitter, we all say, "Hey, we're going to GeekGirlCon. Hey, we're going to GameholeCon. We're going to see you at PAX U." I have explicitly stated very clearly before these conventions for the past year or so, "Hey guys, if you see me in public, feel free to come up and talk to me, but I do not like hugs. I do not like to be touched. It's very triggering for me. So please avoid that." And set the boundary ahead of time so that people have sort of an idea of how to prep for that interaction if you are a public facing figure and people are going to be looking for you. Again, it's that whole thing about communicating your needs and being able to say, "This is what I want, this is what I don't want."
I agree. That's the problem, because he'd seen me hug someone else. He was disregarding my previous statement about how I don't do hugs. So it was really, really,
I've seen a lot more of those recently, and it's great, especially as someone who oftentimes I'll see someone, I'm like, "Oh man, their work is really cool," and I don't want to bother them. So like, I'm not going to go up to them. And so it's been cool to see some of those messages by creators that I don't know personally, but I think are really neat, and to be like, oh, they've explicitly said that like, it's okay if they're not busy to go up and say hi. That's awesome. That feels like it gives me the permission. Obviously, I have this like, I'm not going to touch them. I'm not going to like try and monopolize their time or bother them, but having kind of that invitation to go up and say hi can be really exciting. I want to pull back to something that Amelia was talking about pulling in support system, and Diana mentioned around kind of if you feel comfortable setting boundaries. This is a great time to like use your party, right? Like in tabletop RPGs, you're going to have like who's the tank, and well, a lot of games you're going to have like who's the tank and who's the healer. There are going to be people who naturally feel super comfortable setting boundaries, or naturally feel very comfortable like physically blocking you from other people. Some of my best friends at cons are the tall, kind of scary looking men who you can just like hide behind. So thinking about using your support system for their talents. Maybe you're really small and you're able to like squeeze through crowds very quickly, but somebody else you can hide behind when people get scary. So work together as a team to help everybody feel safe. Excellent. Well, we are about out of time, so I'm going to have everybody say goodbye, but thank you so much for spending your evening with us. This was lovely to get to talk about boundaries with everybody here. I had a great time. Are we 1, 2, 3, and we're going to wave and say goodbye? Yes? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.